one, politically, Hickenlooper is going to have to deal with this year as he runs for governor. You know, at one point, the project that he was the centerpiece of is collapsing, and they want to go for another tax increase. That ain't going to happen this year, and Hickenlooper sure ain't going to support it if it does, if he's running for governor. But at some point, RTD is going to come back and say, give us more, even though we've already sold this project twice. Back in 1973, when we had a tax increase for 104 miles of fixed guideway, and then 2004 for another 120
route miles.
120 route miles of fixed guideway transit. You know, I don't care if they do it now. I don't care if they do it in 2 years or 4 years. They're going to have a hard time doing this because they lied, and it's going to be easier to kill. What will the Post, do you think, I know you can't go in the future, is the Post going to be as supportive as on a second time around?
Well, we've written a handful of editorials already saying that if you come back to voters and ask for more tax money, that you need to give us estimates we can really trust. And if at all possible, you need to look at this plan as it exists and scale it back in areas where it's appropriate. Philip Washington, who runs RTD and will oversee the fast tracks going forward, has already suggested that maybe instead of running dual tracks to some of these lines, you could make do with a single track for a while. Maybe instead of running every 15 minutes, maybe you could run every 30 minutes, and those kinds of changes, which we've been more supportive of.
But is it time to say, stop, reset, put it on hold, and let's go right back to the drawing board at the beginning? Or is it just too late?
I think it's time to say stop. I think it's time to say, all right, we want a multimodal system, but that doesn't necessarily mean rail. I mean, if we have to, taxpayers have to subsidize every conceivable transportation mode out there, are we going to have dirigibles? Are we going to shoot people from cannons? Are we going to have pedicabs? All of which are taxpayer subsidized just because somebody says, I would rather do this than take a bus. Why can't we just run buses? We can run buses every 30 minutes. We can run buses every 6 seconds down a freeway lane and move a lot more people than any light rail line in the country.
Because it's not sexy, and it doesn't make contractors happy. It doesn't make debt workers happy. It doesn't make unions happy. It doesn't make anybody who makes money off the process happy. And it's not cool.
It's all about making money for the people who are going to
talk to me a little bit about mobility. And this is something that I learned at an earlier age when I bought my $500 car, and it kept me in college and allowed me to start my business. That mobility saved me compared to other things. This book, Gridlock, is really a triumph about mobility, but how do we go from here? So instead of dwelling so much on fast tracks, why is this important? Why should we care about mobility?
Well, as I started doing research for this book, I looked at the history of mobility, of personal mobility, and we all know that we've gone through these phases. We had steamboats, we had streetcars, we had steam-powered passenger trains, we had cable cars, we had horse cars, we had bicycles, and all of these different kinds of mobility, it turns out, made absolutely no difference to the majority of Americans. In 1910, most Americans were no more mobile than they had been in 1810 or 1710. And that's because most Americans lived in rural areas. They couldn't afford to ride passenger trains. Even many of the Americans in urban areas couldn't afford to ride streetcars. So they were basically walking, or if they were farmers and they could afford horses, they rode around on horses. That was as mobile as people were until Henry Ford invented the moving assembly line on which he built the Model Ts. And he doubled worker pay, and he cut the price of his cars in half, and suddenly factory workers could afford cars. Farmers could afford cars. And it just exploded, and mobility exploded. In 1910, I estimate the average American traveled only about 3,000 miles a year. Today, we're traveling almost 20,000 miles a year. That's a huge increase in mobility. That gives us access to better paying jobs, and our incomes have increased tremendously because of that. Gives us access to lower cost consumer goods, better medical care, better social and recreational opportunities. The civil rights movement, the women's rights movements, all depended upon automobility for their success. So
but we
huge
hate
benefits.
Cars, don't you understand? Cars are evil, nasty things that clog our highways and pull people out of the community, the loving community of the city center, to these awful burbs where they shouldn't be living. We have a problem that there's too few roads, and we've got congestion. That's why people like you on the left, I'm looking at you, You love multimodal transit because, you know, we need a choice from that automobility, right?
Well, it sounds good, and that's the problem with, once you look under the hood with fast tracks. It sounds great to have a gleaming car that takes you to the downtown center or takes you to the appropriate or the approximation thereof, so that even in the suburbs you can have a community-oriented development with condos and stores and shops, and who wouldn't want to have that kind of lifestyle? And I'm not.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to.
Well, a lot of people like that kind of lifestyle.
And I don't want to take it away from them.
And I don't want to take it away from them
I just don't want to subsidize it.
However, when you really do the math and realize that this enormously expensive project and all that money could be going to do something else, like improving the roadways or the bridges or the bottleneck situations that create traffic congestion for the great majority of us, once you realize that transit is only moving a very small fraction of people off the road, it's hard to see why you would keep supporting that.
All right. Stupid question, try to give it a small answer. Why are we stuck in gridlock? There's nothing more frustrating than going down the road, and your time's valuable, you've got to go, and it's gridlock. You might see the choo-choo train fly by, and you're thinking it's actually going faster, when in reality, given all that stops, it rarely is. Why are we in gridlock? And then tell me how to get out of it.
Well, we're in gridlock because the automobile has been demonized for so long that people believe we shouldn't build any more highways. We shouldn't do anything. We should actually make traffic signals not synchronized so that people have to stop when they get to every single red light. We should take lanes out of existing roads so that the roads get more congested. It's no coincidence that in 1982, Congress started diverting money from your gas taxes, what you pay when you fill up your car, to transit and other things. And since then, the amount of traffic congestion on our highways is more than quintupled, because we're spending our money on things that people don't use instead of spending it on things that people do use.
In the Denver metro area, this is an incredible statistic. When it comes to transportation money, more is spent on transit than on roads. Is that right?
That's right. And transit carries less than 2% of all passenger travel and none of the freight in the metro area.
But we're spending
about 55% of the money
on transit, which carries 2% of the miles.
Right. And if people approve another fast tax increase, it's going to be much more than 55%. And that's
you know who
that's
I blame?
Typical. You look
I
at
blame
Portland.
the workers at the Denver Post editorial board. All right, as a guy who's concerned about the environment, does the idea of having faster, better roads make sense, or is it make sense to put some sort of brakes on the automobile?
No, it totally makes sense to have faster, better roads, and especially
more roads, because environmentalists hate
or at least
roads.
more effective roads, and I know they do, and that's been a big discovery for me as I've worked on transportation throughout the past year. This idea that you need to discourage people from driving, and if that means congestion, so be it. If having 4 lanes of traffic if it would slow things down, if you could somehow put a median or a jogging path or a bike trail, that appeals to city planners right now, and I don't understand why. That doesn't make sense. It creates congestion elsewhere. It makes the great majority of us who have to drive and commute to get to work waste a lot of time and money and gasoline, and all of that's going up into the atmosphere. Especially now that cars are getting so much more environmentally friendly, and at some point will be very, very friendly because they'll be electric and these hybrids and whatnot. It just seems like since 98% of the folks are going to use cars anyway,